Onde tem cultura, a Vale está. No poder criativo que nasce dos palcos, orquestras, das artes, das ruas e dos museus. Na valorização das diversas identidades brasileiras e na preservação de memórias. É valorizando a cultura que crescemos e evoluímos juntos. Instituto Cultural Vale.
Ministério da Cultura e a Associação Casa Azul apresentam 22ª Flip, Festa Literária Internacional de Paraty. A Flip conta com benefício da Lei Federal de Incentivo à Cultura, PRONAC 235060, e possui acessibilidade para pessoas com deficiências física, visual e auditiva. Tem patrocínio Master, Instituto Cultural Vale. Patrocínio Ouro, Itaú, CCR e Suzano. Patrocínio Prata, MAC Móveis, Eletronuclear, O Globo e Sesc. Patrocínio Bronze, Sebrae e Globo Livros. Parceria institucional, Prefeitura de Paraty, Secretaria Estadual de Turismo do Rio de Janeiro e Museu do Território. É uma concepção Associação Casa Azul. Realização, Ministério da Cultura, Governo Federal, Brasil, União e Reconstrução. Obrigada e boa mesa. Flip, o encontro da literatura com a cidade.
Estou aqui em Paraty desde 91, cheguei em Paraty em 91, dia 6 de junho de 91, e comecei a trabalhar na Caipifruta em 93. Então estou aqui há 30 anos, 31 anos mais ou menos, trabalhando na Caipifruta. Nós temos muitos fregueses, muito clientes de fora, muito turista. Eu vi muitas crianças crescerem, se formarem. Hoje em dia são doutores, voltam na minha barraca e me cumprimentam sempre. Tenho contato com eles. Eu gosto muito de trabalhar com o público, gosto muito de atender os turistas. Isso aí me faz muito bem. O dia que eu não venho trabalhar, eu fico triste em casa. A minha barraca é como se fosse um consultório de psicólogo, porque todos que chegam lá têm uma história para contar, né? A gente acaba fazendo terapia na própria barraca, a gente acaba sabendo de muitas histórias, né? A gente procura ajudar muitas pessoas, né? De alguma forma a gente procura ajudar conversando com as pessoas. Então eu escolhi Paraty, há 30 anos, 31 anos eu escolhi Paraty, não me arrependo e não pretendo sair daqui.
Flip, o encontro da literatura com a cidade.
Boa tarde, Paraty.
Good afternoon, Paraty.
Chegamos a essa 16ª mesa.
So we're now going to have our 16th panel with the two Latin American authors who are amazing, and they have a wonderful literary imagination. But I am very happy that they are here today because they represent all Latin American authors that have been doing a huge work for literature, as Noemi Jaffe said in the Inventing Latin America panel. For some strange reason, we in Brazil do not feel as if we were part of Latin America, and we're going to see that we have much more in common with our hermanas than what we imagine. So, in addition to thanking interpreters and sign language interpreters, I would like to thank all the translators in Brazil, because the two authors have 3 books published, and they were all translated by Silvia Maxime Felix, which is an amazing translator. And I would also like to remind that you can ask questions both inside the room, but also outside at the square. Just write it down and give it to one of our people. And I am going to call Stephanie Borges, poetress and translator, and she is launching at Flip now a second book named Nome Não É Uma Chave. Stephanie.
Bom, eu quero chamar as nossas autoras.
Well, I would like, without further ado, to call our authors, Arelis, Uribe, and Gabriela Cabezón, Cámara.
Quero começar mais uma vez.
And I would like to start again by thanking
a Fundação Casa Azul,
the Casa Azul Foundation, Ana Lima Cecilia, for the invitation to participate again at this flip. I would like also to thank all of you who are here with us, but also outside and online. I would like to thank our sign language interpreters that make our conversation accessible, also the translators in the booth, and all the technical team that allows this wonderful celebration to take place, because we who were here since like Wednesday, we are witnessing many wonders that take place here. I will very briefly introduce our authors, and then we move into our conversation. Arelis Uribe is a writer and journalist who was born in Santiago, Chile in 1987. Her debut book, Stray, was published in 2016 and awarded Best Book of Short Stories by the Ministry of Culture of Chile. Later, it was published in countries such as Spain, Mexico, and Colombia, also France. And she also wrote the book of chronicles, Let Everything Blow Up, Que Explote Todo. And she was a professor of writing at the University of Santiago and the University of Chile.
Gabriela
Cabezón Cámara was born in Buenos Aires in 1968. She's a writer, cultural journalist, and creative writing teacher. She published novels, books of short stories, and comics. Her debut work, which, by the way, has been recently published in Brazil, Slum Virgin, was shortlisted for the Silvério Cañada Memorial Award, in addition to being chosen as Rolling Stone Argentina's Book of the Year. In 2013, she was a writer in residence at UC Berkeley in California, United States. In 2015, she helped found Ni Una Menos, a movement against feminicide and gender violence, which is still a reference in the struggle against violence against women in Latin America. And she is also today, among other activistic activities, she resists what is called capitalocene in defense of the life of all beings, and we are going to hear more about it today. Her book, The Adventures of China Iron, was originally published in 2017, and it was translated into many languages. It was also a finalist for the 2020 International Booker Prize and a finalist for the Prix Médicis the following year. Gabriela's work has been already translated into 11 languages, and her most recent novel, Las Niñas del Naranjal, won the Ciutat de Barcelona Prize and will be published in 2025 by the Companhia das Letras Publishing House in Brazil. This panel named Sacred and Profane offers many ways of connecting it to what's happening here at this flip. From João do Rio, the city, the relationships between bodies and the cities, and we've been talking about this author who was a gay man who was watching the behaviors and desires and the many things that were happening around the city. But when we decide to look from the perspective of women in Latin America, I think it is very important to think of the experience of being a woman circulating within big cities. Like when we take, for instance, the Strays short stories and also Slum Virgin, we are speaking of books in which, at the same time, those women are trying to experience the urban space in different ways. They are all the times reminded of how dangerous the city is and of how the city is not made for them from a class perspective. Then I would like to start by asking to both of you, the following. How do Santiago and Buenos Aires are present in your work in terms of this idea of the city being a space in which women circulate, but which is not a comfortable place, because it is a place in which they are always feeling some sense of danger, or they are always being reminded that they belong to periphery, they belong to the slums. At the same time that they want to be in the city and circulate around it, they are all the time being banished or expelled from it, in a way.
Well, first of all, hi. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you so much for Flip Party for this fantastic festival. I would like to take just 1 second, and do something else. It's a second, I promise. Today is October 12th, and I think we cannot forget to talk about something. Today is the day of the endless genocide that the Kingdom of Spain started and that other countries allow to keep on happening to a greater or lesser degree. All of the countries in Latin America America, maybe not you with Lula here in Brazil, but it's a disaster. So because of this, celebrating this date, I would like to read a poem by a man called Caístulo. He lives in Tartagal in northern Argentina, where oil, wood is extracted, soybean is cultivated, and there is husbandry. Everything that was the promise to make us rich and is one of the poorest areas in the country. Caístulo fell in the little space in the forest. He fainted for 12 hours, and after being fainted for 12 hours, he started talking with the trees. Then he met a boy, Danicelco, that took down notes of what this person that is illiterate wanted to say. And this person, Caístulo, translated the language of the trees to witchy poetry, the holy song. You know that the poetic function of Western languages in other cultures as witchy culture is a sacred song. And Dani translated this poem in witchy into Spanish, and I want to share it with you because today, especially every day, but today we should remember them. This is how it goes. Can you see this? How do you name it? Fungus. We call it torch. When we bury a person that has died, it comes up and gives us light. Can you see that tree over there? It is one of the last survivors. Beautiful trees there were here. Man came and cut everything, damaged everything. They see the red angico and they cut. They see the peach tree and they cut. They see the shimus molly and they cut. Where is this going to lead us? When is this going to end? These are the mothers that share with seeds life that never fails. And when a person wants to leave its grief, they listen to the song of the seeds, the fruits that blossom and open up. Each one of them will translate, will give you information, important information. The tree hugs you and gives you thoughts. But us, we are different. We do not think, really, we do not think. But when you go near a tree, the tree gives you knowledge. Knowledge is essential for the tree. The man looks at the tree and only thinks about material. And trees are those persons that walked the world and that now lighten the world. A round of applause for this witchy community member, Caístulo.
Arelis, você pode
Arelis,
falar pouquinho de Santiago nos seus contos enquanto...
Can you then tell us a little bit about Santiago?
I would like to talk about the street and the public space. There is something that for me was essential when I started to exploit narrative writing, which is an idea from Amat. He said, write as you speak. And then when I met this way of writing, I found other hints to understand and find a narrative voice with a rrhythm. L.A. Ujar says that to write, you have to listen to the people. And in this flip, João do Rio is the tribute writer. He says, I love the streets, eu amo a rua in Portuguese, and I am a militant in this literature. I love to listen to how people talk. I like to listen to the deformations of language and how you can transcribe this in a text. So talking about the streets and the experience in the public space, for me, the first thing is to understand how the street talks, the incorrect manner in Martín Fierro José Hernández transcribes the words from the mouth of the character Martín Fierro, and he doesn't speak very well. He speaks deforming popular language. He is not academic, learned, sophisticated. It's the street language. So this is the first relationship my text has with the street. And I would like to tell you that I'm part of a feminist organization that is called Observatory Against Harassment in Chile. It's a group of young women that want to engage in a political, cultural change in Chile from harassment, sexual harassment in the public space, because our bodies, depending on our look, our gender identity, and our garment, has different readings in the public space. Sometimes we identify as women, suffer harassment. They tell us sexual phrases. They touch us without our consent. And a group of women got together in this observatory against harassment. And the first piece of legislation was passed. This is fantastic. The important thing for us is the cultural change. And this is also present in my book. In my book, depending on your identity, your experience in the street, in the city, in the public space is different. And last, the book is called The Strays. Stray dog, street, the vagabonds in the streets. They have no home, they have no pedigree, and it's an idea that I thought was important to talk about the relationship between the characters and the street. And last, talking about the date we celebrate today, a stray dog. A stray dog. Stray in Chile is a word from the indigenous peoples that is derogatory to name the mixed races dogs. It's derogatory, but we are a mixture, an never-ending mixture. Before the Hispanic colonization, they were mixtures with violence or loving mixtures that generated new identities. And this panel is called Sacred and Profane. There's nothing more profane that something has been changed, mixed. And for me, the idea of being a mixture, mixture of indigenous, in my case, Afro-descendant, European, talks about a continent that has a diverse root. And me, myself, as a Chilean, I never learned about this mixture. We were taught that we are a continuation of Europe, and the indigenous component has been erased, denied. And in my book, I wanted to exploit this. I was raised as a Chilean, which is the denial of the indigenous. As Gabriela says, I look like an indigenous people. The color of my skin talks about my ancestry. Even though history wanted to erase the history of the indigenous peoples. In Chile and in other places of the world, the indigenous peoples have a living language, and they are part of the resistance. In school, they tell you that the native communities existed, talked, are museum pieces. It's an act of violence. It's a magnanimous act of violence, because these peoples have endured 500 centuries with alive languages and words, and they're existing, surviving, and their culture proliferates.
Gabriela, if you could maybe share with us this whole idea of a woman's body and the city's body, or the body of the city, and considering how Buenos Aires actually is a territory made up of exclusions. When we talk about slum virgin, the characters will go to the slums, and then they leave the slums. But when they're in the slums, they're always saying that the city is on the other side of the wall. There's always a city against them. How this experience of being a woman will influence this literary production, where the city is actually this very hostile space?
Well, I would say that the experience of these women in the popular classes gives you the vision from the periphery, not from the center. And this could look like a problem, but in order to write and in literature, it's not a problem. It is a free perspective and point of view, because if you are in the center, you have to look after something. And we, in the periphery, we don't have anything to take care of. We need to invent, because we were not allowed to invent. So I believe that that gives me a position in which I would say it's almost more beautiful and freer in this place. And then, I don't want to quote Borges, it's a nightmare. Borges says the following: Argentines can write about anything because we have to invent our own tradition. And in that sense, I think that it's okay. I mean, you think about yourself as a peripheral community inventing a tradition all of the time. And what Arelis just said was interesting in the sense that language, popular language, I don't agree with the deformity of language, because if it's deformed, it's in the museum, it's dead. It's the use of language in the academy, because they are the only ones that understand what they're talking about, and leave everybody outside. Please invite academia to disseminate their work so that we can all talk together and know what they're talking about. But the experience in the city, the experience in slums, I mean, there's an interesting component there, even though it's way weird and contradictory. Buenos Aires is a city with large mass movements. Traditionally, we Argentines go out in the streets and we make a mess. We make a mess. It's a space of rebellion, beauty. We go out to the streets and complain. And this is part of hostility in the streets in Argentina. Everybody comes together, except for some very specific exceptions where people do not mix. The super rich, I don't know what it's like because I've never been there, but I mean, we're all together mixed in the streets. But in the periphery, in the urban periphery in Buenos Aires, and within the city of Buenos Aires as well, where you mix, you have the slums. A slum, it's a large place around communities of the super rich. It's a ferocious hostility, and yes, people do not circulate, or yes, I mean, the poor go to the houses of the rich as the help, and that is a very nasty and badly paid circulation. It's not well paid, and it's nasty, and it's not nice. And where the language is alive is in the popular classes. When I was a teenager, I had friends that they were two transvestite girls. I was 15, 16, 17. I was a little girl. I was not a transvestite. At that time in Argentina, if you went out the streets as a transvestite, first they would punish you, and in the second time as a punishment, in the third time a punishment, and the fourth time they would take you to prison. I'm talking about teenagers, 15, 16. But I had never heard about the rhetoric, creativity that these girls had. They invented words all the time inventing words. Poetry came out of their mouths. These were girls that were homeless. They were prostitutes. I mean, they hadn't chosen prostitution. There was no other option. They are the most creative persons I've ever met. And this novel, Slum Virgin, is related to the language they used. And when I was studying at that time literature, they even, I mean, my novel quotes the Odyssey. It's a mixture, and as you say so, in this mixture, I find what it's alive and sacred, profane, non-sacred. I think that we have to reconquer the idea idea of sacred. Sacred is coming together, the amorous mixture. Sacred words have thousands of meanings and not what power wants to impose. Sacred is what comes out of our words alive, coming out from our mouths. That's what I work with. I would like to ask you one thing that seemed to be very interesting, because your books are different, they do this through different paths. However, it seems to me that there is this issue that is not only to introduce women who are not interested in an image of a traditional femininity, but they will express this the whole time. There is one short story from The Strays, and the narrator says, I don't want to behave like a good lady, like a lady. I want to go out, I want to drink, I want to party, and I do everything, and still be a good student, get good grades. In Slum Virgin, we have the same woman, the trans woman, who is a lot more of a woman than a cis woman. And she embodies the whole tasks of caring, of maternity, and she does this more naturally. Cleopatra will care for Maria Cleopatra with more dedication than her actual biological mother. So if you, both of you, could talk a little bit about how did you build these characters? And how did you find their voices? How did you find their styles? Well, in my specific case, it is an autobiography, and I would like to talk about something else that has to do with the streets, of the public space. In my book, there are descriptions, and I'm a chronicler, I'm a journalist, and I love descriptions, real space descriptions in my short stories, because for me, it was really very important when I realized and developed within myself the seeds of these stories. I wanted to tell stories of women, of young women that lived in the blue-collar workers' neighborhoods, the poor neighborhoods, the urban peripheries. When I live, my mom lives, when my grandma lives, I had my knowledge of literature. I love to read, but I felt that contemporary Chilean literature, or at least what I was reading, what I knew, was so high class, so intellectual, so bourgeois. And of course, there's very beautiful Maria Luisa Pombal has fantastic prose, but her characters are ladies that use their servants, and they have a lexicon to talk about the handmaidens, the servant, the butler. So my first education had to do with class. My characters live in the neighborhoods where I lived, where I grew up. I wondered one day, if I ever write a book, I want to talk about my neighborhood. My neighborhood should be literature. My neighborhood should be in the books. So this is the starting point to start building these characters. This is the place, the spatial place where they belong. And then there's another dimension that has to do with gender, with a gender perspective, which is, of course, we have all the terminology in dispute, and sometimes we fall in gender binarism. I consider myself a woman, but I love other women. I'm pansexual, bisexual. I'm not straight, that's for sure. And when I started writing, I also wanted to express these identities. As a woman that reads, I had devoured Garcia Marquez, Cortázar. I had read more men than women, I confess. And I said, if I ever write a book, it is where I will take it out on us. I want my women to be characters, women that love other women. Those are my characters. And I started to look into my memory. And yesterday in a presentation, I said that I suffered racism before knowing what racism was. I loved women before knowing what lesbianism was. I lived the experience before I knew how to express it in language. So to write, I had those stages. I had the intuition that these women were the main characters of my book. My stray dogs are female dogs. In Spanish, when we generalize, we colonize. I wanted a book in the feminine plural, stray. It could have an X. Inclusive language varies. Brigitte Basalo talked about this morning, about inclusive language. 10 years ago, when I wrote this book, this is what I had in mind. So these were my first intuitions. Class perspective, gender perspective, class. I still believe in the fight of classes, in the tension there exists. You were talking about that, Gabriela. People work, and their time is worth less than those other people. My grandma worked all her life, and she's still poor. That is the horrible capitalist pyramid. I wanted to portray these lives. I don't speak Portuguese. I will speak in Portuguese, and I want you to know which these straits are. I will start again. This is the first story called Unknown City. And this is how it goes.
When I was little, I would kiss my cousin, and I was in the city of I was in my sister's city every weekend. We would sleep in the same bed. Sometimes we would take off our shirts and we would play, and we would put our breasts together, nipples together. At the time, they were barely 2 pink stains on a fat torso. My cousin and I had been together since forever. Our moms got pregnant 2 months apart. They breastfed us together and changed our diapers together. We got chickenpox together. It was almost without saying that when we grew up, we would live together and play house with dolls, but in real life. I thought it would be me and her always, but adults mess up things.
Gracias.
¿Cómo se construyen esos personajes?
How do I create these characters? Not really feminine women. Well, look at me.
Me sale fácil.
It's easy.
Nunca fui.
I have never been. I don't know. I never played with dogs. I never wanted to wash the dishes. I don't know. I never thought that I was less than my brother. No, you have to do the dishes. No, you have to do. They would give me the dishes, and I would drop them. I would drop them, literally, not on purpose. And then my mom would get mad, but I would drop them. I never learned how to do the dishes. And when I was a teenager, my friends were 3 transvestite girls. And I want to tell you about that. Yes, can I? Should I? I mean, the thing is that we did everything together. And I do remember the feeling of feeling inappropriate. There will not be a place in the world for me. I met these transvestite girls, but I never met lesbian girls. There was a place in the 80s in Argentina. It was a paracultural place. And this guy, Batato Barea, he was still a guy. He would express a feminine dimension. It was super weird. And I go into this bar, this paracultural center, and I see him transvested and reading a Juana de Barburu poem that talks about the tree and says, "Today I was told I was pretty." And then I thought that is my place. If this place exists, okay, I can live here. There were other procedures and processes, which is the process in which you take an insult and a derogatory word, and you take it with pride. It's the classic queer procedure, but we do it well. And there is Nestor Perlonger text on Eva Perón, and it's called Evita is Alive. Eva Perón is a magnificent figure in Argentina. You can argue with Perón, but not with Evita. If you don't love Evita, I mean, you're an E.T. You're a bad person, because Evita was gorgeous. Evita is somebody that wants to give houses for single women. She would look for a house in the slums. No, she would expropriate a house in the high-class neighborhoods in Buenos Aires. So what we did is to take the image of a princess in the court of Franco, the dictator. And then the Montoneros, the guerrilla group in Argentina, the Montoneros, before the coup, they transformed Evita in an icon. And Nestor Perlonga, a queer person that in the exile came here and in Brazil saw light and happiness, this queer person captured again this image. Can I say bad words? This belief, this hope that academic studies will give them the possibility to have a better future. And when I was describing these characters, and I was thinking about a title for my short story, I thought that they were like little stray dogs in the street. They are alone, abandoned to their own luck. They are a mixture of dog that this character found is like that. She just gave birth. Maybe she was raped by any dog in the street. She was raped, and then she has her pups, and she is responsible for those pups. So it's another variable that I wanted to show as a metaphor that exists. And I see with stray dogs and the poor classes in my country. And another coincidence is that this dog, this stray dog, and this girl are scared. And I'm also always in this situation. I want to think that I am the danger. I don't want to be robbed of the night. It's scary to walk at night. It's very scary to walk at night. So the dog and the girl are scared. And then, I won't tell you a spoiler, but something does happen in the short story. So those were the metaphors, the ideas, the comparisons that I was elaborating in my short story. And then I say, I'm plagiarizing myself. It's always two feminine characters that have an adventure, a dog, and then I realized that it's not that I was plagiarizing myself. I was really creating a body that had unity, a subject unity, a subject matter unity that created a group of short stories, and the book is called The Strays because of that. Well, in my case, I loved your question. I loved your question. And I believe that yes. there is a parallel between what happens historically with women and what happens with animals. The idea, Brigitte is here, she was talking about the universal. This is an operation, historically, as we see it today. It's an operation in the West, 16th, 17th, 18th century, in which a group of gentlemen want to make us believe that their position, their interests, and their desires are those of everyone. And you know what? No, it's not. It's obvious that not. We are all falling in the abyss of climate collapse. Latin America is burning in fire. Sons of bitches are putting fire in Latin America. These same gentlemen of the universal concept that wanted to make us believe that there was one single world. There is not one single world. There are thousands of worlds, thousands, millions of worlds. For me, the challenge, the ever more important challenge, is to try to represent part of the multiplicity of the world. It is very difficult, of course, it is. I don't know what a whale thinks, but I know that the whale sings, and sings poems, and those poems rhyme. I know that the birds have their languages, and of course, I could go on and on and on, and with reference to dogs, this is Shusho, China Iron's dog. I mean, my heart was opened in fantastic and beautiful things, feeling things I had never felt before for this dog, Shusho. Love amongst animals exists, and between animals and humans exist. And when we talk about universal concepts, humanity as the center, as the culmination of a cosmological process, we are not the end of anything. We are an avatar of the flesh in the earth. And I hope that the best of us, I hope we will endure and we will last. And there's something else that we need to understand in the multiplicity of the world. Of course, your world, my world is not the same world as Elon Musk. Of course not. We live in different worlds. Elon Musk lives in his world. But with reference to other species, the same perceptual apparatus creates other worlds. My senses make me see the world in one way because I listen in a certain range, I see certain colors. The world of the tick that has, I think they have two senses, and I think they feel the acids that we mammals expel, and they can feel temperature. That's it. The world of ticks is that. That's the world, their world. That's a world in itself. And to be able to see that you are not the center of the world, but there are many worlds, is also the possibility is to see the knot of genocide, the beginning of this conversation, with the extermination of the original communities. They are exterminated to steal their lands, steal the common resources, and they're exterminated to exterminate other forms of life, to make us believe that there's only one single world. And there's not one single world. There are many worlds. And now we need to go back to the original communities to understand how we do, because if we have a tiny bit of the jungle, a tiny bit of land, a tiny bit of river, it's because of their resistance that are building other worlds, because they live in a different world. So for me today to write the highest challenge is not to be anthropocentric, a Westerner, which is a dead theology that kills everything to reproduce itself. That's it.
Nós recebemos algumas perguntas muito boas do público.
Well, we had some very good questions from the audience, and I would like to merge two questions in one. Norberto de Assis asks if dealing with orality in literature is a way of listening to other people and inventing a new language. And Gianna Viscardi asks you if you find it challenging the moment you have to work the literary text with the publishing houses when you are actually trying to subvert the norms of language, trying to find this other language to speak of different existences.
Well, in my case, no, I never had any problems with publishing houses. Did I understand the question well? Censorship?
A revisão do texto, né? Se às vezes quando você
Actually, when the text is copy-desked, let's say when the text is very much marked by oral language, and then it may be sent back to you with someone saying, oh no, this is a mistake, it is not according to grammar.
No, the publishing house that published Strays for the first time? No, never bothered about the language. And this is a text. I was very, very careful and very traditional in my writing. It is not prose or the language that is disruptive. It has a lot of jargon, orality, argot. No, but the publishing house didn't say anything. And now that I have the word, and just to say goodbye, before we finish, I want to say something. Before I give Gabriela the microphone, I never said hello. I never said hello, how are you, and started talking, going on and on. I just want to say that I'm so happy. I didn't know that we had festivals and fairs like this one. We're here in this place, but outside you have the transmission in the square. But I mean, I had never lived an experience like this festival. Paraty is the festival. The people are the fair, and I want to congratulate you, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here in such a lovely place. First,
gracias.
And the second thing is that I want to say a word, a concept that I heard, but that with Daniela Catrileo, a Mapuche poet, and she has an essay on the word champurria, and she analyzes phonetically what is champurrio, the sound water makes when it comes together. Champurria, a mixture, being a bastard, a stray dog. The mixture is how you can put a thread in the rivers of an entity that is a mixture, while you sew. Read Anila Catrileo, a Mapuche poet, and to wrap up, October 12th, today, in literature like Daniela Catrileo, this Mapuche poet. She is a narrator, a poet from the Mapuche community that rescues Kwamalumpun, which is the language of the Mapuche peoples that have resisted 500 years of the intent of the Spanish and the Chilean state to eliminate their culture. It's a miracle. It's a miracle. We have to celebrate, learn, and know, because there are other ways of living, other ways of poetry, language that can enrich our terribly colonized and Eurocentric civilization. And the massacre of the state of Chile, 3 names of Mapuche leaders that have been murdered during the so-called democracy after Pinochet's dictatorship. Nicolasa Quincreman, environmental leader opposed to a hydroelectrical dam. She drowned. She was found drowned Camilo Catrillan. She was shot in the back while driving his tractor. He was murdered by the police forces in my country. And Matias Catrileo murdered by a shot of the Chilean state while the occupation of territories that belong to the Mapuche peoples. Today, Huelmapo is occupied, and this is a hand of the Chilean hand, the echo of European colonialism in this land. After what she has said, no publisher ever bothered me because I wanted to write. No, they don't bother you with that. No, never. Nobody asked me to change anything. What was the other part of the question?
Quando você se aproxima da oralidade,
if you come close to orality and trying to reproduce the way the people around you speak, if this is maybe one way of inventing a new language based on how you hear or listen to other people, or if you have any difficulty with the publishing houses, if they try to correct, review, bring it to a certain type of grammatical standard, say, oh, this sounds weird. Do you suffer that kind of issue?
No, publishers don't care. They don't care. They tell me, at least the editors I work with, they say no problem. And with reference to the fact that working with the orality is listening the others better, it is just to pay attention. In literature, language is just an invention. And in fact, when you start writing, this is what I feel. It's as if a river went through me from the back, and then it flows through me. That's when I'm in trance. The rest is the exercise. But we're filled with the voices of everyone, the voices of what I read, the pictures I saw, the soap operas, the Brazilian soap operas. I saw so many, I watched so many Brazilian soap operas. It is as a river with thousands of currents. Champuria. The Mapuche word, champuria. I will tattoo this word, champuria, in my arm. That's it. You need to be flooded by the waters. And I would like to say something. The Argentine state does exactly the same. The conquest of the desert. No, in history, back in history, the conquest of the desert. No, today, we still have ferocious repression. The Argentine state uses repression in a very democratic way, discriminating in a very democratic way. Maybe the native communities, Javier Milei and Patricia Bullrich, because we have to call them by their names, they're very democratic when they exert violence. If you're not a multi-millionaire person, you can be killed and you can be hit upon. They made things very simple.
I would like to comment on this. Sometimes some of the authors, the Brazilian authors, will meet certain challenges. Ana Cecílio highlighted your works, your books are very well translated into Portuguese. Well, we have to recognize the work that Silvia Massimini Felix did. She's a wonderful translator. And also, I would like to talk about the work of Bazar do Tempo with Arelis' work. And the editions are beautiful. Moinhos has published also Gabriela's work. So they will all be signing their books at the end of this table in the Flip bookshop. So I'd just like to remind you of that. We still have a couple of minutes. And I would like to maybe consider something with you based on your work, your books. these women, they also seem to be constantly in a transformation process. In the stories by Arelis, these are girls that are leaving their childhood behind, they are going to colleges, they are discovering their sexuality. This is a bit of a process of maturing. On the other hand, the main characters by Gabriela, they will go through a more radical experience. Sheena escapes, she runs away, and she's living a number of adventures, living, a certain period, and she has this relation with nature, and she's discovering her friendship, desires, and other ways of living, other worlds in this coming of age. And also, in the Slum Virgin, when Quincy goes out to write an article, a story, and she has a meeting with different people, and that will transform her life. Did you actually consider these different transformation processes, or did you just, well, I have this character, I have the story, and this is how I'm going to tell it? Or did this transformation happen as you went? Where this woman was going? Did you know beforehand?
Well, when I started to write these short stories, which are the first short stories that I wrote, I did have the idea of transformation in the most classic narrative way. A book can be understood as the transformation of a character from A to B, the arc, what canons explain in the development of a character. But of course, I was thinking about this. I mean, how characters were together, they are apart, children growing into teenagers, women, encounters, and disencounters. And what I paid attention to, or what I think when I'm writing, transformation, movements in life, and this transformation can be described with verbs. I think that verbs are the engine of a narrative, because the verb is movement in a narrative. Yes, that's it. That's it. Thank you. Well, for me, what I like to do is the following. I'm fascinated by transformations, how people end up being and doing things that maybe 5 years ago you had never imagined, or things that you're not supposed to do. I think that this is very interesting, which is not there in what you're supposed to do when you are born. And I'm a fiction writer. Since I'm a writer, okay, let's party, let's transform everyone. But I mean, I believe that sometimes we're imprisoned, and I love the adventure of the transformation, the worm that becomes a butterfly that could become a worm. I love the possibility of changing in adventure, matter, living crazy matter, unfinished matter. They make us believe we have a finished shape, but we don't. So it is a flexible, rich, and ever-changing matter, and I love it.
And your characters will be transformed also when they are met with differences, be it when they see maybe class differences. In Arelis' short stories, people will start opening new doors, other possibilities when they're confronted with what is different. But in the case of your characters, sometimes these are people that are completely different. In the case of Sheena, when she meets Liz, or when Uchi goes to the slum and starts living with Cleopatra and all her extended family in the cumbia party, these are people who probably, if they were not open to these meetings, nothing would have happened. The narrative wouldn't be as rich as it is.
¿Qué narrativa no sería tan rica? No
As
entendí.
narrativas do romance, as histórias
I
do
guess
romance,
your
as aventuras
narrative,
que elas
the
vão
adventures they would
vivendo,
live
conforme elas
would not
vão
be as rich if they weren't confronted with what is
encontrando
different,
essas
as they
outras
meet
pessoas.
these other characters, these other people.
Y me parece que el encuentro con lo distinto
I believe that
es
when
lo
you
que te hace
find what's
moverte.
different
Yo
is
creo que esa
what
es la acción.
transforms you. That
Es
is
el
the
encuentro con
action,
lo
the
otro, con lo que
encounter with something
no sos
else,
o no
the
sabías que sos
encounter.
un
I mean,
poco,
you didn't know that you
con
had
lo
this
que te
in
permite
you.
desplegar
This is
partes
what
que
gives
no
you the
tenías.
possibility to show
Igual yo
parts
cuando escribo lo
that
primero
you
que tengo es
didn't
una
know.
musiquita.
I
Lo que
always
me
put
lleva
some
es la
music when I start
musiquita.
writing, and this is
Yo
the
soy una
music that
escritora de
leads me
musiquita.
somewhere. I
Después
write
vienen los
with
personajes,
music
después viene
after
la
my
historia.
characters,
No sé,
then
nunca sé
I
para
find
dónde
that
voy a
narrative. I
ir.
never know where
Como
we're
que mi
going
trabajo es
with my narrative,
encontrar
with
esa
my story,
musiquita
with my
primero. Y
plot.
bueno, con esa
First,
musiquita
I
después viene
put
todo.
some
Si
music,
encuentro la
and then if
musiquita.
I find my music, everything comes after that. I love it. Thank you. So nice.
Vou fazer aqui uma última pergunta.
One last question.
Que o Daniel Montoya mandou para a Gabriela, que ele pergunta sobre
And
o seu
Daniel
romance
asks Gabriela,
mais recente, que
in
ainda
your
vai
most
ser
recent novel that will still
publicado
be
aqui no
published here in
Brasil,
Brazil,
Niñas
it is Niñas
que você faz uso
del
da língua
Naranjal,
Guarani
and you use the
e faz
language of
referências
Guarani,
a lendas
and you make the
indígenas.
references
Como
to
você
native
vê a
population or
importância dessa
indigenous
visibilidade dos
legends. So how do you see the
indígenas
issue
e a
of
questão
visibility
da
of the
autoria da
native
mitologia
populations, First
indígena
Nations, and the whole
nesse momento da
mythology
literatura
of indigenous
contemporânea?
peoples in this moment of contemporary literature?
Bueno,
Well,
yo siento
I
la profundísima
feel
necesidad
a deep
de
need
aprender a mirar al
to
mundo
learn to
desde
see the
otras
world
perspectivas.
through other
Hallo a la de los
perspectives.
pueblos indígenas
I find
mucho
in
más
the
vital que la
indigenous
nuestra,
peoples
que la
more
nuestra es una perspectiva de
vitality.
muerte.
Our
Estoy
perspective
muy
is
interesada
death.
en eso.
And I'm interested
En
in the
cuanto a la
perspective of these
autoría
peoples
de
and
las
authorship
mitologías,
of the mythology.
Son creaciones colectivas.
They are
Si la
creative,
pregunta fuera,
creative,
no sé si es así.
collective
Si la
creations.
pregunta fuera
If
si
the
es
question
legítimo
were,
que yo, que no
if
soy
it's
una persona
legitimate that
racializada,
me, that I'm not a
utilice
racialized person, to
cosmología guaraní,
use
¿sabes qué? La estoy
use
comparando
Guarani
con la
mythology,
cosmología
I
cristiana.
compare Guarani
¿Y por qué
cosmogony
la uso?
with the
Porque la
Christian
cristiana hay un Dios
cosmogony.
solo que
In the
crea un
Christian
mundo.
cosmogony, we
Por
have
ejemplo,
a
en la
God that
lengua
creates
guaraní
a
hay
world.
un ser
And in
increado que
the
se va creando a
cosmogony
sí
of the
mismo
Guaranis, we have a
junto a un colibrí
creature
que le da de
that
comer.
creates
O sea, también hay
himself
una
with
flor.
a
Escúchame, ¿vos querés que
bird
yo no hable de eso?
that
de que hay
feeds
otra manera
this
de ver el mundo mejor, más
creation
rica,
and
más
eats a
vital y más
flower.
viva?
This is more
Porque la otra
vital,
solo trabaja en el
alive,
sentido de la
because the
alienación, de
other
separarnos a
cosmogony
nosotros del resto
is
de la
an
tierra. Y no
alienation,
estamos separados del
separates
resto de la
us
tierra.
from the rest of the earth, and we're
Y
part of the same
encuentro
thing.
que
And I
los
find
guaraníes lo
that
saben antes y
Guaranis
mejor que yo.
understand
Entonces lo
this
cito.
better than
¿Cómo
me.
no?
How can
¿Y
I
por
not
qué uso
quote
guaraní?
their
¿Por qué uso lenguas
cosmogony?
indígenas?
I use
Porque
indigenous languages, I
también
use
encuentro
Guarani
necesario, son
communities,
lenguas que casi no han
ideologies,
sido
because
consideradas
these are
lenguas hasta hace poco.
languages that have
Son
never
lenguas
been
que a la
considered
gente le daba
languages.
vergüenza hablar
These
porque
are
hablarlas era ser
languages that
condenado al
people were
ostracismo, a la
embarrassed to
pobreza.
speak, because if you spoke these languages,
Sí, las
you
voy a
would be
usar todo lo que
condemned to
pueda.
ostracism,
Y
to
también
poverty. I will use them as much as I
te voy a
can.
leer, que es algo que
And
hago en todos los festivales
what I
que
do
voy,
in all
en todo el
festivals,
mundo,
in all over
a
the world,
poetas
I read
originarios
poets from
desde sus
the
propias voces, que es lo que a mí me
native
resulta más
communities
interesante.
in
No
their
como
own
mi literatura tendría que
voices.
permanecer
But
todo el tiempo blanca, ni en pedo, no me interesa,
will
me
I
muero.
always write about white literature? No. Fuck no. No way.
Gente, essa conversa está maravilhosa.
This is a wonderful
porém,
conversation.
o nosso tempo
However,
está
we have run
terminando.
out of time.
Eu quero agradecer
I would like
muito
to
ao
thank
nosso público.
our audience.
Quero
I would
agradecer
like to
muito a
thank
vocês.
all of you.
Ainda temos
We
mesas
still have
maravilhosas
amazing
acontecendo na nossa
roundtables
programação.
ahead of
Espero que
us
vocês
in our program, and I
aproveitem
hope you
muito
will
ainda
all
o que ainda tem que
benefit from
acontecer
this
nessa
with everything that will
22ª Festa
happen on the
Literária Internacional de
22nd
Paraty.
International
Muito obrigada.
International Literary Festival of Paraty. Thank you so much.